Señor Secretario General de la ARADI, Embajador Alejandro de la Peña Navarrete, Señora Subsecretaria de Cooperación y Asistencia Técnica, Doctora Silvia Espíndola, Señor Subsecretario de Desarrollo del Espacio de Libre Comercio, Doctor Álvaro Espinosa, autoridades nacionales presentes, estimadas y estimados colegas del cuerpo diplomático, queridos funcionarios de la ARADI, señoras y señores, muy buenos días. Ohayou gozaimasu en japonés. Ohayou gozaimasu. Antes que nada, quisiera agradecer a todos ustedes por vuestra presencia y también expreso mi profunda gratitud a la ARADI por brindarme esa maravillosa oportunidad. Es un gran honor para mí poder realizar esa presentación frente a todos ustedes. En esa ocasión, se me ha presentado la opción de disertar en 3 idiomas, japonés, inglés y español. Dentro de ellos he escogido el idioma universal que es el inglés. Por eso ahora en más, permítanme hablar en inglés. Muchas gracias y arigatou gozaimasu. Okay, once again, thank you so much for your kind invitation here in ARADI. As the Secretary General Alejandro's ambassador mentioned that it's a great honor and pleasure for me to be invited to speak in such an excellent audience this morning. It's been a while since Japan had made a presentation in front of the ARADI, so indeed it's a really unforgettable moment for me this morning. Thank you once again. And talking about your kind invitation, I'd like to express our sincere gratitude to inviting Japan for the Copa America this time. That's not talking about the economic integration, but sports integration. The most popular sports are football and soccer in Latin America. Well, as you see, watch the game with Ecuador last night. Japan did our very best, and we have to go back home to Japan. We could not proceed to the next stage. However, we presented quite a young team this time. So they learned a lot, especially fighting with the champion team Uruguay, the Celeste. The other night, 2-2, and the draw is excellent. We did really our best, and that's what I call the healthy competition. That's why I believe in trade and investment too. We should promote the healthy competition and create the win-win situation. That's my philosophy, and that's my bottom line. So I like to talk about, and based upon my philosophy, I was working together and searching for that, the win-win situation through that economic integration this morning. As we are aware that Japan and ARADI, Latin America, geographically, it's true. It's that the most farthest distance in the world. Japan is really down under, totally the other opposite side of the globe. However, we share the same value. And this morning, I like to express all that the information and relevant concept of what's going on in Japan and part of the Asia at this moment. And under the title of Japan's vision toward the world and Latin America. And this is the outline, the menu of this morning. The ambassador, Alejandro, gave me only 30 minutes, so I'll be really precise and concise this morning. I hope I could deliver enough message and information. As you are aware that we serve the most delicious Japanese cuisine this morning. Hope my presentation will be delicious and fruitful as our Japanese delicacies. Okay, I'd like to move on to our menu. The first, Japan's EPA, FTA policy. Really, I like to touch upon, reiterate the importance of our philosophy, the bottom line that we share with you, especially ARADI people, the common value of democracy, freedom, rule of law, basic human rights, respect for international laws, and the market economy. Perhaps many of you ask, Ambassador Shindo, what are you talking about? This the common value is all we all take for granted. We all share that. But as serving as that ambassador, extraordinary plenipotentiary of Japan here in Uruguay, a great country under this part of the globe, I really feel I should rate it keeping this common value we share, especially this really complex world political and economic situation. needless to say, Aradi is a top leader, founder of that, the what we call the free trade. And I highly value the activities, your great contribution that Aradi has accumulated past many years, almost 40 years since your foundation. And I like to recall, because I reiterate, I'm ambassador of Japan here in Uruguay, talking about free trade and economy integration. Year 1986 in Punta del Este, in Hotel San Rafael Hotel, you all initiated what we call that GATT Uruguay Land. That's really the game changer that set the base for that what we call free trade and economic integration path until the status quo. Following that, what we call GATT Kennedy round and the Tokyo round onto Uruguay round, and it reached to create that World Trade Organization in 1996. Since the huge benefit of free trade, that we don't see it on a daily basis because we don't see it physically, so we don't feel it. However, that's the huge, it brings a benefit on our daily life, and we should never underestimate this. That's I like to stress. And I'm suggesting in this sense to Uruguay President, Vice President, or the ministry, the dignitaries, that you should nominate, designate that Punta del Este San Rafael Hotel as a World Heritage. Because for me, that Punta del Este, the place that born, that got around, is really a sacred place. So really, I like to suggest Uruguay should name that San Rafael Hotel as the sacred place, as the World Heritage, representing that high spirit of free trade. By the way, I'm using this world map chart this morning. It perhaps not looks familiar to all of you. This is the map we use in Japan, that Japan is the center of the world. And perhaps you feel a bit uncomfortable. We are right here in Montevideo, Uruguay. You can see very far from Tokyo, Japan. But I like to show you, to give you some idea, Japan is the center of this huge area. We call that Asia-Pacific Rim, Pacific region, including India, Asia-Pacific region. This is what we talk about when we talk about the economic integration of the Asia-Pacific, because this is the growing center of the world economy today. Not only Japan, but China, ASEAN, India, and of course United States and the Latin American countries. This is the growing center of the world today. And now I'd like to move on to the Japan's EPA, FTA policy. Our idea of promotion of economic diplomacy is one of the priority areas of our Japan's diplomacy. Of course, the purpose is maintain and develop an open and stable rules-based international economic order, promote economic growth of the world and Japan. And here we see the three aspects of Japan's economic diplomacy. As I mentioned, rules making to strengthen the free and open international economic system. And precisely free trade agreement and the economic partnership agreements is a practical measure to promote the objective. And the second, supporting Japanese companies to expand overseas business. And the third, promoting diplomacy for securing natural resources and promoting inbound the flow. That's our idea. And perhaps you are joining the Aradi conference this morning, so you are all aware of that term, commercial trade term is FTA, free trade agreement, and EPA, economic partnership agreement. But not many people know what EPA means. That means economic partnership agreement, not saying that environmental protection agency. In the United States, people, when I talk about EPA, people think about, oh, EPA is an environment protection agency. No, it's not. But in Japan, to make clear the difference, free trade agreement, economic partnership agreement, we clearly use it as the different term. Why? Because FTA is a kind of traditional term that, of course, it's a free trade agreement, but basically talking about liberalizing that, lowering the tariff and eliminating the quota, etc. Quite a simple type of FTA. But when we talk about EPA, it's far beyond. As I write under these principal areas, today's when we talk about EPA includes a new challenging area like electronic commerce, state companies, labor, of course, environment, and even medium and small size enterprise promotion, how we create what we call the value chain or a supply chain utilizing this EPA scheme. That's a very important one because I don't see much small and medium-sized enterprises contributing to the trade substantially in this part of the globe. And that's what we like to promote also. And the basic strategy of Japan's EPA, as I said, we like to create a win-win situation, especially to increase the exports and overseas investment, increase the foreign direct investment, and globalization of Japanese companies, and promotion of domestic and regulatory reforms. Definitely, from this point of view, this FTA or EPA works as, let's say, the catalyst to promote that business activities. And basic, our EPA's policies achieve and comprehensive and high-level EPAs and promote mega FTA with major trading partners. Now, I'd like to show you once again that the world map from Japan's point of view, explaining the principal EPAs that we are tackling, we have realized most recently, namely what we call that TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, and that Japan, EU, European Union EPA, and that RCEP with the EPA with ASEAN, Southeast Asian countries, those three pillars this morning. Japan, so far, we've concluded and enjoying 18 EPAs together with 21 nations. Of course, already Mercosur, NAFTA, and the Pacific Alliance, and you are the top leader of the champions of the FTAs and leading such a broad wide areas FTA network through this region together with all the bilateral FTAs together. So compared with those numbers, Japan is still lagging behind. We should really much have to learn from you. However, at the same time, this huge Asia-Pacific region, there's a tremendously new surge of that economic integration going on at a quite fast speed today. Of course, talking about the global economy, United States is that from the GDP point of view is the #1 champion, and Japan always was the second place, but China surpassed it, so the #2 GDP nation is China today, and Japan in the third ranking. Still, China and India with the huge population, more than 1 billion people, and Asia, almost 500 million people, they are getting quite rich and the growing what we call the middle class. In addition to that, the super rich classes, that makes a very much different in terms of that what we call that purchasing power. So this is really the fastest growing country of the world. And this ASEAN, Southeast Asian nations GDP in total, almost equivalent to that the whole GDP of Latin American region, about $3 trillion US dollars. I'm serving as a Japanese ambassador in Uruguay, but unfortunately there's a very few ASEAN nations representing in Uruguay, only Japan, China, and Korea, only 3 countries. So we don't see ambassadors presence of India, Thailand, Vietnam, Singapore, Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand. We don't see anybody. So unfortunately in Uruguay, we don't see how the Asian nations are doing our activities on a daily basis. But really, seeing, believing, if you have a chance, I strongly recommend you should visit not only Japan, but the rest of the fast-growing Asian region. As my professional career that Ambassador Alejandro-san kindly introduced, I've been serving past almost 40 years promoting trade and investment. I visit all that Asian nations and almost all the countries of the globe. But I feel myself that so amazing, impressive, the fastest growing economy of the Asian nations. They are not changing on a 10 years basis, not 5 years a term. Every year they are changing their landscape. So I would suggest even Latin America, Uruguay, very far from Asia, but we should take a good advantage of this fastest growing the economy of the world. From that point of view, I really like to express my gratitude or high reputation to Uruguay, because of course Uruguay is the original member nation of the Mercosur, and of course the ALADI is based in Montevideo. But change that definitely their economic and trade investment structure. Antes, before, they are all dependent on, of course, the two superpowers, Brazil and Argentina. But looking at their structure change in the past 10, 20 years, they successfully switched to the portion dependence of trade investment on the China and ASEAN nations. I think it's quite a good the option that the policy direction that Uruguay introduced and been very successful in multinationalizing, diversifying their trade and investment structure. Also, I'd like to share with you some of that statistics of trade figures between Japan and the rest of the world. I look into that world trade statistics, and world trade in terms of the export is 17 trillion, 316 billion US dollars in the year 2017, 17 trillion US dollars. And the share of that, the export world trade of Latin American countries is 5.5%, very small number. Even a huge country, Brazil, has only 1.2% of the total share of the world export. Meanwhile, Asia has that share of 35%, and the EU 34%. And the individual country, United States 9%, Japan 4%, and China 13%. And now I'd like to share with you another trade statistical data of Japan. Japan's export to the world is 697 billion US dollars, 697. And again, the share of Latin America is 4%. And the Mercosur is only 0.6%, very small. Meanwhile, the share of the Asia is 54%, and the United States 90%, and the EU is 11%. And now, from that the imports the point of view, Japan's imports year 2017 was 670 billion US dollars. And again, the share of Latin American country was 4.1%, 4.1. And the Mercosur was 1.2%, only 1.2%. And now the share of the Asian nation was 49%, about 50%, half. And EU was 11%, United States 10%, China 24%. That shows not only because of this geographical the distance, here I see the lack of what we call the value chain or supply chains. Why that the trade of EU or South Asian Asians are so big? That because they export imports, they go back and forth when they produce, let's say, automobile, electrical appliances. They export parts, they import parts, they fabricate and make final products, and now exports to, let's say, United States or China, the market. That's what's going on in Asia. However, I don't see that type of value chain or supply chain scheme going on in Latin America. So that's the point I like to suggest that we should work together to move forward. Now, today's topic is economic integration. So I made another research. Now, how many what we call the FTAs, EPAs now exist in this world? So I checked that the FTA reported to WTO, World Trade Organization. The number at the end of last year, it was 309. 309 FTAs exist at this moment. Of course, it's growing, and needless to say, already created in 1981 is quite important as the scheme, the leader of FTA in this region. Of course, Mercosur 1995 and CARICOM 1973, or Central American Common Markets the 96 one, NAFTA 1994, etc., etc. And compare with that, Japan still have only 18 EPAs, and we really like to even learn from your the rich experience, and that's I like to work together, aiming at the mega FTA, hopefully the Japan Mercosur FTA in the future. Okay, now FTA and the EPA. Our highlight FTA EPAs today, as I mentioned, we have three FTAs. First, what we call the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. If you are familiar with that, this is quite challenging FTA, because original idea, United States was also the member of TPP. But unfortunately, with the appearance of the new Trump administration, they withdrew, and they are not part of the member at this moment. Hope United States will come back in the future. So what we did is we missed U.S., but the rest of the 11 countries got together, and we signed, and the TPP took effect, entered into force December 30th last year. And this is the quite, how I call the new type of 21st century type EPA, because it's not talking about the goods and services, talk about liberalization of the investment, intellectual property rights, financial services, electrical commerce, state-owned companies, etc., etc. It's quite a new type of FTA aiming at the future. So this is now the model prototype of FTA for us, Japan, today. So let's say United States is asking us to start a new trade negotiation, like U.S. is pushing the China. So we are telling the U.S., President Trump and USTR, right, Heiser, Ambassador, that's okay, then, but we can offer those TPP based at the criteria of the opening our market, and that's the bottom line. And you should look into not only the bilateral trade, but should have an even larger point of view. So to make a distinction with the TPP, the actual correct name of that new FTA is called that Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP. Hope you will remember this TPP as an important FTA scheme for not only for Japan, but for the whole Asia-Pacific region. And I like to also mention my colleagues and member countries of Chile, Mexico, and Peru are also member of TPP. Now, another mega EPA, that's Japan-EU EPA. Also, we had a really intensive accumulated negotiation with the EU, and finally, we all agreed and signed, and entered the force first day of February this year. It's a huge the FTA. Perhaps you don't notice in Latin America. It has that world GDP 30% of this Japan EU EPA and holds that 40% of the world global trade. Indeed, it's a really mega EPA, and we all agreed we will lift almost all that tariff. Japanese consumers already start to feel we can buy delicious cheese and wines from EU much less than the reasonable prices. So consumers started to feel also it's that the EPA brings that benefit on daily life. And since it's again high-level EPA together with the EU, it concludes and includes that new provisions like the EU insists that geographical identification, its protection. Also, first EPA, we mentioned that climate change and the labor rights and protection of consumers that EU strongly insist. So this is a new type of EPA, and especially we really feel that what we call the protectionism tendency going on in the world. So I hope this Japan EU EPA set a model of trade liberalization to the world, and we really like to be flag bearers of free trade. So we like to show our flag that we should strongly support the free trade together with the EU and Asia Pacific, our allies. And the third pillar of EPA is with the Asian nations. We called it Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP we call it. Perhaps you are not familiar with RCEP in Latin America, but this is another very important mega FTA. It's not agreed and signed yet. We continue the negotiation with Southeast Asian nations. What is important of this RCEP is that not only Asian nations, that the member countries should be including China, Korea, and India, and Australia, and New Zealand. So what we call the ASEAN plus 6 countries. That is a very important initiative. Hope this will be concluded in the very near future. That will be another game changer in the future. Now, since we are in Aladi headquarters in Montevideo, I'd like to touch upon the Mercosur-Japan economic relationship. Japan is not the member, of course, not the Mercosur, have not concluded yet that started yet FTA negotiation with Mercosur, but you kindly invited us to join the Mercosur Summit meeting back to year 2011, and our foreign minister participated at that time, and we started our dialogue. And I like to mention the historic moment year 2014. Our Prime Minister Abe announced that what we call that the policy speech and tres juntos, 3 juntos, that progresar juntos, liderar juntos, inspirar juntos. And last year, last December, Prime Minister Abe once again visited the Argentina and visited for the first time in our history. The Prime Minister of Japan officially visited Uruguay and Paraguay. Indeed, it was a historic moment for us. And announced again a new policy speech, now using that new term is connectivity. Connectivity of economies, that's free and open economic system through global value chains and quality infrastructure, and connectivity of values, rule-based multilateralism, and the connectivity of the wisdom, realization of sustainable development, the goals, and of course the exchange of students, and that of course the sports interchange, etc., etc. And Japanese Business Association of Enterprises, it's called the Kendanen, Japan Business Federation, together with the Brazilian National Confederation of Industry, CNI, that we should really look into the possibility of starting that negotiation with Japan, Mercosur, EPA. So that's our future, the hope. Of course, there's many political factors. Soon we'll have that election at the parliament, so we should consider all the factors. But that's the way we like to move forward. And now, also, I like to touch upon Japan-Uruguay economic relationship. As I said, last year, December 2nd, our Prime Minister Abe came to Uruguay for the first time in our history. When I talk about the history of Japan, we have history of 2,600 years. So the first visit of a Prime Minister is really the big deal, the historical moment for us. So really, it's a unforgettable moment. And of course, Prime Minister Abe made the top summit meeting with the President Vasquez. And we both agreed to that most important Uruguay products, that beef, carne, and asado in Uruguay. That Ibino Tanat also, Tana wine. And we should work together to mutually open the market for the beef. It was indeed a big deal. And in 2 years, year 2021, we will celebrate 100-year centennial anniversary of Japan-Uruguay diplomatic relationship. And last year, we also celebrated the 110th anniversary of Japanese immigration of Japanese immigrants to Uruguay. So all the series of important events. And let me add that this year, in September, we will host that first Rugby World Cup in Japan. And your Uruguay national team, Los Teros, will participate representing Latin America. Also next year, we will host the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games. So 18, 19, 20, 21, there's all series of the important historical moments coming up regarding Japan-Uruguay relationship. Still, of course, the asado, carne, y vino tana is the most important products for Uruguay. Briefly, Alex explained, year 2000, unfortunately, we suffered that mouth and foot disease of TOSA, and we had to close the market. We could not the imports. But 19 years have passed, and I know how rich, delicious that Uruguay beef is. It's highly first rated in the U.S. and Europe and everywhere else except Japan. So it's not that's the reasonable. So I talked. I asked, of course, Prime Minister Abe directly, please come to Uruguay and we should move forward. And kindly listen to us. And I made the very first Prime Minister visit, and we all agreed after 19 years. And only last month, in the Japanese restaurant chain started to offer the delicious Uruguay beef in all parts of Japan. It's really a historic moment. And now, today, Japanese consumers are enjoying the delicious Uruguay beef. So all the congratulations. I thank everybody here that we all together to realize our dream. And still, I reiterate, the trade and investment should be promoted two-way, not one-way street. So we like to import, promote Japanese delicious Wagyu, the Kobe beef and Matsuzaka beef, another most delicious, at the same time, perhaps the most expensive beef in the world, but never been introduced in Uruguay. So, of course, I talked with Uruguayan authorities. We both agreed. So, officially, now we could export Japanese beef to Uruguay. So, coming up soon, you will enjoy that most delicious Japanese beef Wagyu too. So, please expect a lot. Now, time is past us, and I should conclude my presentation. Last part of slides is that G20 Summit. As Ambassador kindly mentions, later this week, 28th and 29th in Japan, Osaka, we will host that G20 Summit, followed by the Buenos Aires G20 last year. And all the top leaders of the world are now gathering in Japan. So our Prime Minister Abe, we give you all welcome. We like to take a good leadership, chairmanship, and taking advantage of this summit meeting. We like to really send a message, especially from this economic integration point of view. We should once again promote and trade and investment and the EPAs and not the protectionism. That's our bottom line. Of course, we talk about so many important global issues. Now, perhaps in addition to this, like the latest issue of plastic waste and et cetera, there are so many issues we should tackle, but hope we could deepen a discussion together with, of course, President Trump, US, Xi Jinping, or China will come, of course, Putin, Russia will come to Japan. This year, not only the summit Osaka, we've been hosting all that series of ministerial meetings in total 9 cities in all parts of Japan. And to complete this ministerial meeting series, the Osaka Summit will take place Osaka later this week. So we should watch what we could achieve. Now, I think I all used my time allowed. So. Thank you so much. Muchísimas gracias. Arigatou gozaimasu. And I like to conclude by saying that once again, my message is let's work together and promote trade investment and economic integration. And not on one-way street. It should be a two-way traffic. And let's create that win-win situation. It's much better to build a bridge better than build the wall. Let's create a bridge between us. So thank you so much once again, and have a wonderful week. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor secretario general. Gracias al embajador de Japón por esta interesante exposición. Me interesa saber un poco el tema de la inversión japonesa en general y especialmente en América Latina. ¿Dónde se ha concentrado? Si tienen inversión japonesa en Uruguay, ¿en qué rubro se concentra? ¿Y cuál es la proyección de Japón en ese tipo de actividades, en inversión? Gracias.
Muchas gracias, embajador Augusto-san, mi bien amigo. Permítame contestar en inglés. Thank you very much for your the question. Talking about that the investment from Japan to Latin America, as I mentioned, same as the trade figure, the share of the Japanese foreign direct investment to Latin America is very, very small. Yet, we have significant FDI, foreign direct investment to Mexico. It's a great deal. Of course, taking a good advantage of the NAFTA. I'm telling the ambassador, when I served in Mexico almost 30 years ago, the number of Japanese companies is only 300. But today there's 1,100 Japanese companies, almost 4 times larger. And that shows that the remarkable success of Japanese companies in Latin America. And of course, as you can imagine, the FDI to Mexico is automotive sector and automotive parts, etc., etc. And if you remember my presentation, there's a good example of a value chain and supply chain in the automotive sector. Japan exports and automotive parts and fabricate, produce in Mexico and on to export to America and other US and American countries. And that's a good example of the supply chain. And we like to create that type of FDI in this part of the globe, namely Mercosur. And we don't see it very much. Of course, there's another 700 Japanese companies in Brazil. I know there's a significant number in your country and Peru too. But compared with the Japanese FDI in ASEAN nations, there's still much room they should grow.
Quisiera plantearle dos preguntas inspirado en su exposición. Primero, ¿cuán lejos ha llegado o cuál es el estado de situación de la integración de cadenas productivas y por tanto de comercio en el Asia en bienes de alta tecnología? Ahora estamos viviendo una llamada guerra comercial, sobre todo por temas de bienes de alta tecnología, tecnologías de información y comunicación, y quisiéramos conocer un poco cómo se ha integrado en cadenas productivas y comerciales los bienes de alta tecnología, particularmente comunicación, pero también, sin duda, los vinculados a las inversiones en cibernética, en robótica y en 5G, ¿no?, que es algo que estamos avanzando mucho en el mundo recientemente. Segunda pregunta, ¿qué futuro le ve usted al Acuerdo del Pacífico?
Muchas gracias, Embajador. Allow me to once again to answer in English language. Thank you for your the questions. Ambassador, I know you are very much the expert on the AI, robotics, 5G, and so how should I answer to your question? But from a Japanese point of view, that what we call that the commercial war or the trade conflict, especially in between U.S. and China regarding the 5G. Japan, of course, is an ally of the United States, and as I explained to you, we believe in that all the principles, philosophies of democracy, free trade, and the market economy. So we work together with those democratic alliances. In that sense, we should work together. But Japan, no, we don't have that military power. We all denounced that we won't never use the military power to solve that international conflict. So we like to really contribute to utilizing those high technology in good manner. Let's say that automobile sector, electric, and all the companies like Toyota, Sony, Panasonic, all we are pleased to produce and offer services to enrich the life of the people of the world. So we are not really committed to those conflict of, between U.S. and China regarding the 5G, or Chinese companies are involved in that. We, of course, export a lot and import a lot high technology to Asian nations, and that how we create the value chain. However, the highest technology, I should say, we are still producing and developing all the research and development in Japan. Because we also suffered very much from that, what we call that intellectual property rights infringement in China, for example. So we learned the lesson. So we should be very careful in this point. But the bottom line is that from our point of view, we should really work together to better bring that life utilizing the high technology, AI and robotics, etc. That's what I think. And if possible, we like to be a good moderator, coordinator between, let's say, US and China. That's another purpose. We are hosting the G20 Summit this week, and our Prime Minister Abe trying to intermediate between those superpowers. And as for the second point, how we see that important player, United States, in TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, for example, we all agreed only a couple of years ago, after a long, tough negotiation, that the Obama administration agreed the U.S. will join the TPP, and we all were happy. But all of a sudden, appeared that a new administration in the U.S. and quite, how I say, it's a pity always during the election time, that the trade is the issue in the U.S. And unfortunately, trade is always treated badly during the election time because the reason all you know that the labor union and the people complain that the exports damages U.S. industry, they take our jobs, which is not correct from the economic theoretical point of view. However, that's the situation, especially during the election time. Of course, U.S. is entering the presidential election next year, and President Trump or that Democratic counterparts already talking about starting that U.S. election next year. So I think I'm not that optimistic at this moment. I'm basically an optimistic guy. I don't want to be never pessimistic. However, we are not sure we could persuade the U.S. to come back to TPP. It's all up to them. But as I said in my presentation, our stance is we are always open. Although what a pity U.S. withdrew, but still you can come back anytime if you are like and you are ready. Meanwhile, together with other 11 member countries of TPP, of course with Chile and Peru and Mexico, we shall move forward and take a good advantage of trade benefit. So sincerely wish U.S. will listen to us in the future.
Hay un problema en este momento en la parte norte de nuestro continente, que por supuesto se da también en el sur, que tiene que ver con las migraciones. Primera pregunta sería, ¿cómo están tratando ustedes el tema de las migraciones al interior del TPP y en general en Asia? Y segunda pregunta, hay un proyecto que se elaboró en coordinación con la CEPAL para tratar de sacar al Triángulo del Norte en Centroamérica y a el sureste de México de las condiciones económicas tan complicadas en que están viviendo. ¿Qué posibilidades de que ustedes pudieran analizar el proyecto y poder ofrecer apoyo para que esto pueda salir adelante con un mayor vigor? Gracias, señor embajador, y lo felicito por su excelente exposición.
Muchísimas gracias, embajador. Permítame, once again, contestar en idioma inglés, porque me falta mucho castellano. The first point, the immigrations in relation to TPP or other economic partnership agreement. To be precise, that the EPA, FTA agreement don't include that immigration the issue or clause. So we should divide this discussion. It's totally the different the issue. However, of course, more creating the growing the trade and the investment. Of course, naturally, obviously, accompanies that movement on the people and the goods and the services. But Japan, of course, we like to invite the foreigners. We are open. Of course, the immigration situation is very much different compared with your grand country, Mexico. Japan is an island country, and we don't have that the national border, and we don't need to build the wall. However, of course, we have that the immigrants coming from abroad. Of course, that the tourism is a very important the industry we like to promote, and especially as I mentioned that regarding the Tokyo Olympic, Paralympic Games and Rugby World Cup, all the relevant important events coming up. I like to also share with you, Japan also has the quite significant presence of Japanese immigrants in Latin America, especially in Brazil. Almost 2 million Japanese living in Brazil and this part of the globe, the largest community outside Japan. And also, we also invite, let's say, the number is relatively small, but like 300,000 Brazilians, for example, living in Japan. So they are definitely the important group, the core people of that's the connectivity that connects Japan and Latin America. The second point, in relation to that, perhaps the support Japan's aid through SEPARO, that northern countries of that's the peninsula near your region. Of course, I have my colleague serving in those countries, and we closely communicate and work closely together. We continually offer our official development aid, and although the Japan's aid is the small perhaps in number, but especially from a humanitarian and a communitarian point of view, we definitely continue to help and support the complicated issue. I'm not sure how much Japan could be a main player of that issue, but hope we could continue working together with you. Thank you.